Cold arrival, silent start. Have you ever landed in a place where the air itself feels like it doesn't know you? Not hostile, not friendly, just cold, quiet, and indifferent. That was exactly how my first morning in the United States felt. The sky was wide, pale blue, and empty in a way that made my chest feel the same. I remember standing outside the small apartment, breathing in air that smelled unfamiliar, and thinking one simple thought in very broken English: no one is coming. If you have ever tried to learn English while feeling completely alone, you already understand this moment better than you think. I arrived in the US at the beginning of winter. Where I come from, winter is mostly symbolic. In America, winter is physical. It bites your ears. It dries your lips until they crack. It slows your body down before you even open your mouth to speak English. Scientists say cold weather reduces serotonin, the chemical that helps regulate mood. I didn't know that then. I only knew that my motivation to listen, read, and speak English dropped the moment the temperature did. My brain wanted comfort, not conjugation. Survival, not sentences. On that first day, no one explained anything to me. No friendly guide. No welcome speech. No magical moment where English suddenly made sense. I had imagined America like a movie, people smiling, talking fast but kindly, helping the newcomer. Reality was quieter. People were polite, yes, but busy. They held doors, not conversations. They smiled, not slowed down. And suddenly I realized something uncomfortable but important. In the US, help often comes after you show you can stand on your own. When you're trying to learn English, this silence feels personal. Your brain starts lying to you. It whispers, they don't talk to you because your English is bad. In psychology, this is called negative attribution bias. Your brain takes neutral events, like someone not starting a conversation, and turns them into proof that you are failing. That first week, my listening practice wasn't just English. It was listening to my own fear, looping on repeat. I remember going to a grocery store alone. Bright lights, long aisles, too many choices. Someone asked me, "How are you today?" I froze. Not because I didn't know the words, but because I didn't know the speed. Real English is not what you hear in textbooks. It's faster, softer, half-swallowed. My brain needed time. But American conversations don't wait. I smiled and said, "Good." That was it. That one word carried all my loneliness home with me. At night, the apartment was too quiet. No familiar sounds. No background language I could relax into. Linguists say that language acquisition works best when the learner feels safe. But that first week, safety was exactly what I didn't feel. I tried to listen to slow English videos, but my mind wandered. I replayed the same sentence again and again, not because it was hard, but because my emotions were louder than the audio. This is something many English learners never realize. Sometimes the problem isn't your level. It's your nervous system. Climate plays a role here too. Cold weather increases cortisol, the stress hormone. High cortisol makes it harder for the brain to store new information. So when you feel like you suddenly became worse at English after moving to a new place, you're not lazy. Your brain is protecting you. Mine was doing exactly that. It said, focus on staying upright. Language can wait. But here is the quiet truth I learned during those first days. No one helping me was not a rejection. It was an invitation. America doesn't always lift you up first. Sometimes it steps back and watches whether you will take the first step yourself. That realization hurt, but it also shifted something inside me. If no one was coming, then I had permission to move slowly, to learn English slowly, to listen without panic, to read without pressure, to speak even if my voice shook. So I started with tiny actions. I listened to weather reports, because the weather was already controlling my mood. Simple sentences. Repeated patterns. It will be cold today. I read signs. Exit. Entrance. Push. Pull. I spoke to myself while walking. It is cold. I am here. I am okay. This might sound silly, but neuroscience shows that self-directed speech reduces anxiety and improves language recall. In other words, talking to yourself is not weakness. It's training. That first week taught me something no textbook ever did. Learning English is not just about vocabulary or grammar. It's about learning how to exist when no one rescues you from silence. Standing alone in a new climate, a new culture, a new language. This is where real English practice begins. Quietly. Awkwardly. Honestly. And maybe that's the question hiding inside this story, and inside this video. If no one helps you at first, can you still stand? Not perfectly. Not confidently. Just stand. Weather changed my mood. Have you noticed how your mood can change before you even understand why? One moment you feel normal, the next you feel heavy, slow, unmotivated, and nothing bad actually happened. In the United States, I learned this lesson through the weather. Not dramatically. Not in one big storm. But quietly, day after day, as the climate began to shape my emotions, my energy, and surprisingly, my ability to learn English. Back home, weather was background noise. In many parts of the US, weather is a character in your life. It decides how you wake up, how you walk, how you speak. That first week, the sky stayed gray for days. No rain. No snow. Just low, flat clouds pressing down like a lid. I didn't realize it then, but I was experiencing something psychologists call seasonal mood shift. Less sunlight means less vitamin D. Less vitamin D means lower dopamine. Lower dopamine means your brain doesn't feel rewarded for effort, including the effort of listening, reading, and speaking English. So when you feel like opening an English book is suddenly exhausting, it may not be your discipline that's broken. It may be the sky. One morning, I tried to practice English listening like I promised myself. Slow audio. Clear voice. Simple story. But my brain kept drifting. I replayed the same paragraph 5 times and still couldn't remember it. I felt frustrated, almost ashamed. Why am I so weak? I thought. But the truth was simpler. My body was cold. My muscles were tense. My mind was in energy-saving mode. Neuroscience explains this clearly. When the body senses discomfort, the brain reallocates resources away from learning and toward regulation. Translation: your brain chooses warmth over words. In America, climate also affects social behavior. Cold weather makes people move faster, talk less, and keep physical distance. This is not rudeness. It's adaptation. But when you're new and learning English, it feels like rejection. I noticed people kept conversations short. Less small talk. More efficiency. My English listening practice now had a new challenge, not just understanding words, but understanding silence. In some cultures, silence means something is wrong. In many parts of the US, silence just means I'm busy. This misunderstanding slowly affected my confidence. I started speaking less, not because I didn't want to practice, but because I didn't want to interrupt. My brain built a false rule. Good English speakers talk less and listen more. That rule is dangerous. Language learning requires output. You must speak, even badly. Linguists call this productive struggle. Without it, your progress stalls. But the cold, the gray light, and the quiet culture made me shrink instead of expand. Then something interesting happened. I started tracking my mood like I tracked vocabulary. Not with numbers. With simple questions. Did the sun come out today? Did I move my body? Did I hear English from a real human voice? On days when sunlight appeared, even briefly, my listening improved. I caught more words. My reading felt smoother. This wasn't imagination. Studies show sunlight improves working memory and processing speed. My brain was literally faster when the sky was kinder. So I adjusted, not my goals, but my environment. I practiced English near windows. I listened while walking, not sitting. I chose content connected to the weather itself, forecasts, daily news, casual conversations about temperature. When your environment feels hostile, your learning material should feel familiar. Talking about the cold while feeling cold grounded me. It told my brain, this makes sense. I also learned to respect seasonal limits. In winter, I stopped forcing long study sessions. Instead, I practiced microsessions, 5 minutes of listening, 1 paragraph of reading, 1 spoken sentence out loud. Neuroscience calls this distributed learning. Short, frequent exposure works better when cognitive energy is low. I wasn't being lazy. I was being strategic. And here's the quiet emotional shift. Once I stopped blaming myself, my English improved. My mood improved. I began to understand that learning a language in a new climate is not just mental work. It's biological adaptation. Your body is learning America, at the same time your brain is learning English. If you're watching this and feeling unmotivated, heavy, or stuck, ask yourself a gentler question. Not what's wrong with me, but what is my environment doing to me right now? Sometimes the answer is as simple as cold air and low light. And sometimes, understanding that is enough to stand a little straighter. The weather didn't just change my mood. It taught me how to listen, to my body, to my brain, and to English itself. Slowly. Patiently. One gray day at a time. Culture shock every day. Imagine waking up in a place where nothing is wrong, yet nothing feels right. The streets are clean. People are polite. Systems work. And still, your mind feels slightly off balance, like a phone screen that won't rotate back. That was my daily experience with culture shock in the United States. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet kind that slowly drains your confidence, especially when you're trying to learn English at the same time. Culture shock doesn't announce itself. It hides inside small moments. Someone asks, "How's it going?" and keeps walking before you answer. A cashier calls you "hun," and you don't know if it's friendly or strange. People smile at you but don't invite you into their lives. None of this is bad. But your brain, already working overtime in a second language, starts to feel unsafe. And when the brain feels unsafe, it stops learning efficiently. Psychologists explain this through cognitive load. When you enter a new culture, your brain constantly analyzes rules you never had to think about before. How close should I stand? How loud should I speak? Is this joke appropriate? Each question consumes mental energy. Now add English listening and speaking on top of that. Your brain isn't failing. It's multitasking without a break. One of the first cultural differences I noticed was directness. In many parts of the US, people value clarity over softness. They say what they mean, quickly. At first, this felt cold to me. When someone corrected my English directly, without apology, my chest tightened. I thought they were judging me. But culturally, they were helping me save time. This misunderstanding made me withdraw. I spoke less. I listened more. And slowly, my spoken English stalled. Culture shock also lives in expectations. Americans often expect independence immediately. You're supposed to ask questions confidently. Speak up and advocate for yourself. But when English is not your first language, asking feels risky. You worry about sounding stupid. Linguistic research calls this foreign language anxiety. It's not about language ability. It's about fear of social cost. And culture amplifies that fear. I remember standing in line at a coffee shop, rehearsing one sentence in my head. Can I have a small coffee, please? Simple. Safe. But when it was my turn, the barista asked, "What can I get started for you?" My script collapsed. Different words. Same meaning. My brain froze. This is culture shock. Meeting real English. Textbook sentences don't prepare you for cultural phrasing. And when you freeze publicly, your brain records it as danger. Here's the science part no one tells you. The amygdala, the fear center of the brain, activates when you feel socially exposed. Once active, it blocks access to the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for language production. In simple terms, fear shuts your English down. Culture shock creates fear not because people are unkind, but because rules are unfamiliar. So I made a quiet decision. Instead of fighting culture shock, I studied it like language. I observed patterns. Americans value time. That's why conversations are efficient. Americans value positivity. That's why they smile easily. Americans value privacy. That's why friendships take longer, but run deeper once formed. Understanding this changed how I interpreted silence and speed. Silence wasn't rejection. Speed wasn't aggression. It was culture. I also changed how I practiced English. I stopped trying to sound perfect, and started trying to sound appropriate. Short sentences. Clear tone. Calm pace. Cultural fit matters more than grammar accuracy in real conversations. Linguists call this pragmatic competence. And here's the surprise. Once I focused on being understood rather than being correct, people responded more warmly. My confidence grew. My English followed. I practiced with low-risk interactions. Small talk about weather. Compliments about food. Simple opinions. These conversations trained my brain to speak without panic. Each positive interaction rewired my fear response slightly. Neuroscience calls this exposure learning. You don't eliminate fear by avoiding it. You shrink it by surviving it. Culture shock didn't disappear. But it softened. It became information instead of judgment. And my English improved not because I memorized more words, but because I stopped taking confusion personally. If you're learning English and feel constantly off, ask yourself this. am I struggling with language or with invisible rules? Often, it's the second one. And once you see that, the struggle feels lighter. Culture shock isn't a sign you don't belong. It's proof you're adapting. Slowly. Quietly. Every single day. English felt like a wall. There is a special kind of exhaustion that comes from listening to a language you almost understand. Not completely lost. Not fully confident. Just stuck in the middle, pressing your ear against a wall, knowing there is meaning on the other side, but no clear door. That was how English felt to me during those first days in the United States. Solid. Tall. Quietly discouraging. I could read English. I had studied it before. On paper, I was okay. But spoken English in America is not paper English. It moves fast, swallows sounds, and assumes you already know the rhythm. The first time I heard two Americans talking casually, my brain panicked. Words blended together like melting ice. I caught maybe 1 out of 5. My mind jumped to a dangerous conclusion. I don't belong here. This reaction is deeply human. Cognitive scientists call it prediction failure. Your brain constantly predicts what comes next in a sentence. When predictions fail repeatedly, the brain experiences stress. Stress reduces comprehension even more. It's a feedback loop. The more you miss, the more anxious you feel. The more anxious you feel, the more you miss. Suddenly, English is no longer a tool. It's a threat. I noticed this especially on the phone. Without facial expressions or body language, English felt even harder. I avoided calls. I let them go to voicemail. This avoidance felt like protection, but it was actually building the wall higher. Linguists explain that listening improves fastest when you hear messy, real speech, not perfect recordings. By avoiding it, I was protecting my ego but starving my ear. Speaking was worse. When I tried to talk, my sentences came out slow and fragile. I paused too much. I searched for words. Sometimes people finished my sentences for me. They meant well, but it made me feel small. Each interruption felt like another brick in the wall. My inner voice started saying, "Wait until your English is better." That voice is lying. There is no moment when English suddenly becomes good enough before you use it. Use comes first. Confidence comes later. Neuroscience offers a useful image here. Learning a language is like building a bridge between comprehension and production. Listening strengthens one side. Speaking strengthens the other. If you only listen and never speak, the bridge stays incomplete. My wall existed because I was standing on one side, afraid to cross. So I tried something uncomfortable. I started speaking before I felt ready. Not in big conversations. In small, controlled moments. Ordering food. asking for directions, making simple comments. I focused on clarity, not complexity. Short sentences, natural pauses. Research shows that listeners judge fluency more by rhythm than by grammar. Once I slowed down and accepted pauses, people became more patient. The wall cracked a little. I also changed how I listened. Instead of trying to understand everything, I listened for anchors. Key words. Tone shifts. Repeated phrases. This technique is supported by second language. Acquisition research. The brain doesn't need full information to understand meaning. It needs enough structure to guess. When I stopped chasing every word, English sounded less aggressive. More human. Emotion played a role too. I realized that every time I felt embarrassed, my body reacted as if I were in danger. Heart rate up. Muscles tight. Breath shallow. These reactions block language processing. So I practiced calming my body before practicing English. Deep breathing. Relaxed shoulders. Even smiling slightly. It sounds simple, but the vagus nerve connects relaxation to cognitive access. Calm body, clearer words. One evening, I listened to a slow English story while doing nothing else. No phone. No pressure. Just listening. I didn't force understanding. I let the sound wash over me. Something strange happened. I understood more. Not because the English changed, but because my resistance disappeared. The wall was partly made of fear. Here's the truth no one tells you. English doesn't block you. You block yourself to avoid feeling stupid. And that's normal. But growth lives on the other side of that feeling. The wall is not there to stop you. It's there to teach you patience. If English feels like a wall right now, don't try to climb it. Don't try to break it. Just lean against it. Listen. Speak. Rest. Repeat. Over time, walls turn into doors, not because they move, but because you do. Standing alone first weeks. There is a moment in every difficult journey when you realize something uncomfortable. No one is going to step in and fix this for you. Not because people are cruel, but because this is your path. For me, that realization came during the first 2 weeks in the United States. I was standing alone in a quiet room, phone in my hand, no messages. No instructions, no safety net. And strangely, that silence became my first real teacher. Those early weeks were not dramatic. No disasters. No big failures. Just long stretches of doing everything by myself. Finding my way. Reading signs. Listening carefully. Making decisions slowly. In many cultures, community wraps around you at the beginning. In America, independence is often expected. Immediately. This expectation is invisible, but powerful. And when you're learning English, independence can feel like abandonment. Psychologically, this phase triggers what researchers call learned helplessness. If you believe help will never come, your motivation can collapse. I felt that temptation. Some mornings, I stayed in longer than necessary. The outside world felt too loud, too fast, too English. My brain told me, wait until you're more confident. But confidence does not grow in waiting rooms. It grows in motion. So I made a rule. Every day, I would do one thing that forced me to interact, even briefly. Not perfectly. Just intentionally. Buy something. Ask a question. Make eye contact. These microactions might seem small, but behavioral psychology shows that action precedes motivation, not the other way around. You don't wait to feel ready. You move, and readiness follows. Being alone also changed how I practiced English. Without anyone correcting me, I became my own feedback system. I recorded my voice. I listened back. Painful at first, but effective. Hearing yourself speak English activates both listening and speaking circuits in the brain. It creates a feedback loop. Slowly, my sentences sounded less foreign to my own ears. That mattered more than sounding good to others. There were moments of doubt. Watching families walk together. Friends laughing easily. I wondered if choosing this path was a mistake. But neuroscience explains something important here. When the brain lacks social reassurance, it exaggerates threat. Small difficulties feel larger. Temporary loneliness feels permanent. Knowing this helped me not trust every negative thought I had. Thoughts are weather, not facts. I also noticed how solitude sharpened my observation. Alone, I paid attention. How people greeted each other. How they stood in line. How they complained politely. This passive listening became powerful input. Linguists call this ambient learning. Even when you're not actively studying, your brain is collecting patterns. Those patterns later become intuition. One evening, I realized something quietly hopeful. I had gone an entire day handling tasks in English without panicking. Not fluently. Not confidently. But functionally. That mattered. Standing alone was no longer just endurance. It was skill building. Independence, I learned, is not the absence of support. It's the ability to move forward before support appears. America often works that way. People respect effort. Once they see you trying, help shows up naturally. And it did. Slowly. Casually. Without announcement. Those first weeks taught me that standing alone doesn't mean being strong all the time. It means staying present even when strength feels low. Learning English alone is not a disadvantage. It forces honesty. It removes performance. It leaves only practice. If you're in that phase right now, alone, uncertain, practicing in silence, don't rush to escape it. This is where your foundation forms. Quietly. Invisibly. Like roots growing before the tree is seen. Standing alone was not the hardest part. Believing that it was enough was. Love appeared quietly. Love did not arrive with fireworks or dramatic music. It didn't interrupt my loneliness or fix my English overnight. It came quietly, almost politely. Like it didn't want to scare me away. And that was exactly why it stayed. During those early weeks in the United States, when everything felt unstable, love showed up not as a solution, but as a presence, and that changed how I learned English more than any textbook ever did. At first, I didn't recognize it as love. It looked like simple consistency. A familiar voice. A repeated question. How was your day? In slow, clear English. Not simplified, just patient. Psychologists say the brain learns best in environments of emotional safety. I didn't feel confident yet, but I felt safe. And safety is the quiet engine behind progress. When you are learning a language, your emotional state shapes your results more than your intelligence. Stress narrows attention. Comfort widens it. Before love appeared, my English practice was tense. I listened like I was being tested. I spoke like I was apologizing. But once there was someone who didn't rush me, who waited for my sentences to land, my rhythm changed. My English didn't suddenly improve. My relationship with English did. Love also changed my motivation. Before, learning English felt like survival. Necessary. Heavy. After, it became connection. I wanted to explain my thoughts, my past, my fears. I wanted to be understood. Linguists call this integrative motivation, the desire to learn a language in order to connect with another human being. Research shows this type of motivation is far more powerful than grades, tests, or pressure. Love turned English from a wall into a bridge. We talked about small things at first. Weather, food, daily routines, simple vocabulary, repeated structures. This repetition was not boring. It was grounding. My brain finally had context. Neuroscience tells us that memory strengthens when information is tied to emotion. Words learned during meaningful conversations are stored deeper and retrieved faster. I didn't memorize sentences. I lived them. There were misunderstandings, of course. Cultural differences. Emotional mismatches. Moments when my English failed me and silence filled the gap. But silence between two people who care feels different. It's not empty. It's waiting. That kind of silence taught me something important. Communication is not just words. tone, patience, intention. These carry meaning too. Real English lives in that space. I noticed my listening skills improving without effort. Not because the English was easier, but because I was relaxed. When the brain is calm, it predicts language. More accurately, I caught phrases I used to miss. I responded faster. My pronunciation softened. This wasn't magic. It was biology. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, reduces anxiety and enhances learning. Love literally made my brain better at English. But love also challenged me. It exposed gaps I couldn't hide. I couldn't rely on memorized phrases forever. Real feelings demand real language. I had to learn how to explain frustration, boundaries, hopes. Slowly. Imperfectly. This pushed my English forward in a way no exercise ever had. Struggle with meaning is productive. Struggle. It rewires the brain. There was a moment I remember clearly. I tried to explain how alone I felt when I first arrived. My words were broken. My grammar collapsed. But the meaning landed. And I was understood. That moment taught me something powerful. Clarity of emotion can compensate for lack of linguistic accuracy. Communication is cooperation, not performance. Love didn't remove my independence. It didn't rescue me from standing alone. Instead, it stood beside me. And that made all the difference. Learning English stopped being a solo fight, and became a shared space. Even when I studied alone, I felt connected. If you are learning English and feel stuck, ask yourself this gently: who am I learning this for? Not society. Not perfection. A person. A future conversation. A connection that hasn't happened yet. Love doesn't always look like romance. Sometimes it's the belief that someone, somewhere, will understand you. Love appeared quietly in my story. It didn't fix everything. But it made everything possible. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Learning through real life. At some point, I stopped trying to study English and started living inside it. Not because I became brave, but because life didn't wait. Groceries needed to be bought. Appointments needed to be made. Feelings needed to be explained. And slowly, without any announcement, real life became my classroom. This was the moment English stopped being a subject and started becoming a tool. Traditional learning had taught me rules. Real life taught me rhythm. In textbooks, sentences are complete and polite. In America, English is flexible, sometimes messy, often emotional. People interrupt themselves. They shorten words. They change direction mid-sentence. At first, this confused me. But then I noticed something freeing. Real English doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. I began to learn English through ordinary moments. Weather conversations became daily practice. It's colder today. It might rain later. These sentences repeated themselves naturally. Repetition without pressure is one of the strongest learning mechanisms. Neuroscientists call this implicit learning. The brain absorbs patterns without conscious effort. I wasn't memorizing. I was noticing. Daily routines also shaped my language. Cooking, cleaning, walking. I spoke English out loud while doing simple tasks. I am cutting onions. I need more time. I feel tired today. This self-talk might sound strange, but it activates language production without social risk. Studies show that speaking aloud strengthens neural pathways more effectively than silent rehearsal. Real life gave me endless, judgment-free practice. I also learned through emotion. When something made me happy, I looked for words. When something hurt, I searched for language. Emotional urgency accelerates learning. The brain prioritizes information connected to survival and bonding. English attached to feelings stayed with me longer. I forgot vocabulary lists. I remembered sentences spoken during real moments. Cultural learning blended into language learning. I learned when to say, I'm good, instead of I'm fine. I learned that we should hang out. Sometime doesn't always mean a plan. These cultural meanings are invisible in grammar books. Linguists call this sociolinguistic competence. Without it, your English may be correct, but disconnected. Real life teaches what rules cannot. Mistakes became teachers. I misused words. I misunderstood jokes. I felt embarrassed. But embarrassment didn't stop me anymore. Why? Because the cost of not communicating became higher than the cost of making mistakes. Psychologists call this motivational shift. When meaning matters, fear loses power. I noticed my listening improving in noisy, imperfect environments. Cafes, streets, casual conversations. This is because real-world listening trains selective attention. Your brain learns to filter noise and focus on meaning. Controlled listening is useful, but uncontrolled listening is transformative. Life doesn't pause for subtitles. Another change happened quietly. I stopped translating in my head. Not completely, but less. My brain began responding directly in English for familiar situations. This shift is a sign of internalization. It means the language is no longer external information. It's becoming part of your thinking system. That doesn't happen through study alone. It happens through use. Learning through real life also softened my self-judgment. I stopped asking, was that correct? And started asking, was I understood? Communication is success when meaning transfers. Perfection is optional. This mindset reduced anxiety and increased fluency. Fluency is not speed. It's flow. There were days when I still felt tired, still confused, still slow. But I no longer saw those days as failure. They were data. Learning is non-linear. Real life doesn't move in straight lines. Neither does language acquisition. If you are learning English, consider this gently. Your life is already teaching you. You don't need a perfect plan. You need attention. Listen to how people actually speak. Speak when you feel something. Let life repeat itself until the language sticks. English entered my life not through effort, but through living. And once that happened, learning stopped feeling heavy. It started feeling human. Marriage across cultures. Marriage did not suddenly make my English fluent. It didn't erase misunderstandings or turn conversations into smooth movie scenes. What it did, quietly and powerfully, was force me to slow down. And slowing down changed everything. Across cultures, across habits, across emotional languages, marriage became the place where I learned to listen deeper, speak clearer, and accept that understanding is built, not assumed. When two people grow up in the same culture, many things are invisible. Tone, timing, expectations. In a cross-cultural marriage, nothing is invisible. Every small habit becomes a conversation. Sometimes a conflict. Sometimes a lesson. I learned quickly that English in marriage is not the English of classrooms or offices. It is the English of feelings, needs, disappointments, and care. And that kind of English cannot be rushed. In the beginning, I often misunderstood intentions. A short sentence felt cold. A direct comment felt sharp. I reacted emotionally, not linguistically. Psychologists call this cultural framing. We interpret words through the lens of our upbringing. My partner wasn't being unkind. They were being clear. Once I understood this, my listening changed. I stopped listening for threat. I started listening for meaning. Marriage taught me the value of slow English. Not simple English. Slow English. Pauses. Clarifying questions. Repeating ideas in different words. This style of communication reduced conflict and increased comprehension. Research in communication. Psychology shows that couples who slow down their speech during disagreement resolve issues more effectively. Slowness is not weakness. It's precision. I also learned that silence has different meanings. In my culture, silence often means discomfort. In American culture, silence can mean respect, processing, or space. At first, silence made me anxious. I filled it with unnecessary words. Over time, I learned to wait, to breathe, to let silence speak. This improved not only my marriage, but my English listening skills. I became better at hearing what wasn't said. Marriage forced me to practice emotional vocabulary. Words like overwhelmed, appreciated, frustrated, supported. These words don't appear often in beginner lessons, but they shape real relationships. Learning them gave me power. Power to explain myself instead of withdrawing. Linguists note that emotional vocabulary increases communicative competence more than technical vocabulary. Feeling understood is more important than sounding smart. There were moments when my English failed completely. Arguments where my grammar collapsed. Moments when I couldn't explain my feelings fast enough. But something surprising happened. Those failures didn't push us apart. They slowed us down together. We learned to rephrase. To check understanding. To ask, is this what you mean? Marriage turned communication into collaboration. Cultural differences around family were another deep lesson. Expectations about roles, responsibilities, and independence differed. These conversations were difficult. But they taught me structured English. Conditional sentences. Cause and effect. If we do this, then, I feel this because, these patterns emerged naturally. Through necessity. Real grammar learned through real stakes. Neuroscience offers insight here. Repeated emotional conversations strengthen long-term memory. My brain remembered English used in meaningful discussions far more than isolated practice. Marriage created emotional repetition. The same topics revisited. The same feelings refined. Each conversation sharpened my language. Marriage also taught me patience with myself. I stopped apologizing for my accent. I stopped rushing my sentences. I accepted that clarity sometimes takes time. This acceptance reduced anxiety. Reduced anxiety improved fluency. It's a loop most learners never enter, because they pressure themselves too early. Across cultures, marriage showed me that understanding is an action. You don't wait for it to appear. You build it sentence by sentence. Misunderstanding is not failure. It's information. Every misunderstanding points to a place where learning can happen. If you are learning English and navigating relationships across cultures, remember this: language is not just vocabulary. It's values. It's timing. It's empathy. Speak slowly. Listen fully. Ask gently. That's not just good English. That's good communication. Marriage didn't make things easy. It made them honest. And honesty, spoken slowly, is one of the most powerful languages you can learn. Family changed everything. Family does not change your life all at once. It changes it quietly, in routines, in responsibilities, in the way time suddenly feels heavier and more valuable. When family entered my life in the United States, English stopped being something I practiced for myself. It became something I used for others. And that shift changed everything, how I listened, how I spoke, and how seriously I showed up to each word. Before family, my English mistakes belonged only to me. If I misunderstood something, I could correct it later. If I stayed silent, no one depended on my answer. But family removes that safety net. Suddenly, understanding matters. Clarity matters. Your words have consequences. This pressure sounds heavy, but cognitively, it is powerful. Psychologists call this responsibility-driven learning. When others rely on you, your brain prioritizes accuracy and attention automatically. Daily family life created a new kind of English practice. Scheduling, explaining, repeating, clarifying. Simple phrases became essential tools. We need to leave now. Please wait. Are you okay? These sentences repeated every day. Repetition in emotionally meaningful contexts strengthens neural pathways faster than isolated study. I didn't memorize these phrases. They became part of my reflexes. Family also slowed me down in a good way. Conversations became more deliberate. Less performance. More care. When you speak to family, you don't rush to sound impressive. You aim to be understood. This reduced my anxiety dramatically. Reduced anxiety improves working memory. Improved working memory improves language processing. It's a quiet chain reaction that most language learners never experience in classrooms. Children, especially, changed my relationship with English. Children demand clarity. They don't guess your meaning. They ask why until you either explain properly or admit you don't know. This forced me to simplify my English without dumbing it down. Linguists know this process well. Comprehensible input and output. Explaining complex ideas in simple language strengthens fluency more than advanced vocabulary ever could. Family also exposed cultural differences more clearly. Parenting styles, family roles, emotional expression. These topics required careful language. I learned how to express disagreement respectfully, how to set boundaries gently, how to apologize clearly. Emotional intelligence in a second language is not automatic. It must be learned. Family made that learning unavoidable and meaningful. There were hard days. Days when I felt linguistically small. Days when I wished I could express myself with the depth and nuance of my first language. But something unexpected happened. Even when my English was limited, my intention carried weight. Family members listened. They waited. That patience rewired my fear response. My brain learned that speaking imperfectly was still safe. Neuroscience explains this beautifully. When the brain associates language use with acceptance rather than judgment, the amygdala quiets down. The prefrontal cortex activates. Fluency improves. Family created a low-threat, high-importance environment. The perfect condition for growth. Family life also made my listening sharper. You cannot half-listen when someone depends on you. I learned to catch tone changes, emotional cues, subtle shifts. This skill transferred into all English listening situations. Conversations outside. The home felt easier. My comprehension improved because my attention improved. Another quiet change. English stopped feeling temporary. Before family, English was something I was working on. With family, English became the language of daily life. That psychological shift matters. When the brain believes something is permanent, it invests more deeply. Learning accelerates. If you are learning English and building a family in a new country, understand this. Difficulty does not mean failure. It means importance. Family amplifies everything: mistakes, emotions, growth. And language grows fastest where life is fullest. Family didn't make English easy. It made English necessary. And necessity, when paired with care, is one of the strongest teachers there is. Brain science of language fear. Fear doesn't feel logical when it shows up. It feels sudden, physical, and personal. Your heart speeds up. Your mouth goes dry. Your mind goes blank, right when you need English the most. For a long time, I thought this fear meant I was bad at languages. Later, I learned something freeing. The fear wasn't about English at all. It was about my brain trying to protect me in a new world. Your brain evolved to keep you safe, not fluent. When you speak a second language, especially in public, your brain scans for danger. Will I be judged? Will I look foolish? Will I lose status? If the answer feels uncertain, the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, lights up. Once that happens, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for language planning and recall, gets less oxygen and fewer resources. In simple terms, fear pulls the plug on your English. This explains why you can understand English at home but freeze outside. The language didn't disappear. Access did. Neuroscientists call this state-dependent performance. Your ability depends on your emotional state. Calm equals access. Fear equals lockout. Knowing this changed how I treated myself. I stopped saying, "I'm bad at English," and started saying, "My brain is in alarm mode." The alarm often starts with one small trigger. A fast speaker. A loud room. A correction. The brain generalizes quickly. One uncomfortable moment becomes a rule. Speaking English is dangerous. From there, avoidance begins. You speak less. You listen passively. This reduces exposure, which slows improvement, which confirms the fear. That loop feels personal, but it's mechanical. And mechanics can be adjusted. The first adjustment is naming the fear correctly. Fear is not failure. Fear is a prediction error. Your brain predicts negative outcomes without enough data. The antidote is controlled exposure. Not big, scary conversations. Small, repeatable ones. Short sentences. Familiar topics. Low stakes. Each successful exposure sends new data to the brain. We survived. Over time, the alarm volume drops. Breathing matters more than grammar here. Slow, deep breathing stimulates the vagus nerve, which signals safety to the nervous system. Safety reopens access to language. Before speaking English, I learned to slow my breath, relax my jaw, and drop my shoulders. These physical cues told my brain, no emergency. My words followed. Another key insight: your brain hates uncertainty more than mistakes. When you hesitate too long searching for the perfect word, uncertainty spikes. The alarm activates. But when you choose a simple word and keep going, uncertainty drops, even if the word isn't perfect. Fluency is a byproduct of momentum. Perfection interrupts momentum. The brain prefers flow over accuracy. Listening fear works the same way. When you try to understand every word, your working memory overloads. Overload feels like danger. The alarm activates. Comprehension drops further. Instead, listening for gist, tone, keywords, intention, keeps cognitive load manageable. Your brain stays calm. Meaning arrives. Research consistently shows that top-down listening reduces anxiety and improves understanding. There's also something called error salience. Your brain remembers embarrassing mistakes more vividly than quiet successes. One awkward sentence can outweigh 10 normal conversations in your memory. To counter this, I started recording wins. Not achievements. Wins. I ordered food. I asked for help. I understood the joke late, but I understood it. This retrained my memory system to notice survival, not threat. Social context amplifies fear. Authority figures. Groups. Native speakers. But the brain doesn't actually know who is important. It just senses attention. The trick is to narrow focus. Speak to one person. Even in a group. Anchor your attention. The alarm responds to perceived audience size. Make it smaller. Sleep and nutrition also play a role people ignore. Sleep deprivation increases amygdala reactivity. Low blood sugar reduces cognitive control. If your English feels worse on some days, it might be biology, not ability. Treating your body well is language practice, by another name. Perhaps the most powerful shift came when I reframed fear as information. Fear pointed to edges, places where growth was possible. Each time my heart raced, I knew I was near learning. That didn't make fear disappear. It made it useful. Psychologists call this reappraisal. Changing meaning changes response. So if your voice shakes, if your mind blanks, if your English disappears at the worst moment, pause. Breathe. Your brain is not betraying you. It's overprotecting you. Thank it. Then take one small step anyway. Fear fades when the brain learns a new pattern. Speak, survive. Repeat. Over time, the alarm quiets. The words return. And English becomes what it always was, just another way to be human out loud. Small actions that worked. Big transformations rarely come from big promises. They come from small actions, repeated so quietly that one day you look back and realize something has changed. For me, progress in English did not arrive through motivation speeches or perfect study plans. It arrived through tiny habits that felt almost too simple to matter, but they worked. And they worked because they respected how the brain actually learns. One of the first small actions was choosing less, not more. Instead of forcing myself to study English for 1 hour, I committed to 10 minutes. Just 10. Neuroscience explains why this matters. The brain resists large, undefined effort, but accepts small, clear tasks. 10 minutes feels safe. Safe tasks reduce resistance. Reduced resistance increases consistency. And consistency beats intensity every single time. Listening became my foundation, but I changed how I listened. I stopped treating listening like a test. I stopped pausing every sentence. I listened once, sometimes twice, and then moved on, even if I didn't understand everything. This trained my brain to tolerate ambiguity. Language researchers confirm this. Learners who accept partial understanding progress faster than those who demand total clarity. My goal shifted from understand all words to understand the situation. Progress followed. Another small action was speaking out loud every day, even when no one was there. 1 sentence. Sometimes 2. Talking to myself while walking, cooking, or driving. I feel tired today. This weather is strange. This practice activated speech, without social pressure. Brain imaging studies show that self-directed speech engages similar neural networks as conversation. In other words, your brain doesn't fully care who you talk to. It cares that you talk. I also limited correction. This sounds wrong, but it matters. Constant self-correction interrupts fluency and increases anxiety. I allowed myself to finish thoughts before fixing anything. Linguists call this delayed correction. Fluency improves first, accuracy follows. When I stopped interrupting myself, my sentences became smoother. My confidence grew. Accuracy improved naturally. Writing small notes helped too. Not essays. Just short lines. A thought. A feeling. Writing clarifies thinking. It slows language down enough for the brain to process structure without pressure. Research shows that writing reinforces vocabulary retention more strongly than rereading. 5 lines a day were enough to create momentum. I also learned to anchor English to habits I already had. Coffee in the morning meant listening to English news. Walking meant listening to a story. Brushing teeth meant repeating one sentence. Habit stacking works because it removes decision-making. The brain likes routines. Once English became part of existing habits, it stopped feeling like extra work. Feedback was another small but powerful action. I didn't ask for correction on everything. I asked for one thing: pronunciation, or word choice, or clarity. Specific feedback feels manageable. General feedback feels overwhelming. Cognitive psychology confirms this. Targeted feedback accelerates learning more than broad evaluation. Rest was part of the system too. I stopped studying when my brain was tired. Fatigue reduces neuroplasticity. Rest restores it. Some days, resting was the productive choice. Letting the brain consolidate information is as important as input. Sleep strengthens memory. Guilt weakens it. I tracked effort, not results. Did I show up? Did I speak today? Did I listen? Progress is invisible in the short term. Tracking actions prevents discouragement. Over time, results appeared without announcement. Perhaps the most important small action was kindness. I stopped attacking myself for mistakes. Self-criticism increases cortisol. Cortisol blocks learning. Self-compassion lowers stress and improves persistence. This is not emotional advice. It's biological strategy. If you are learning English and feel stuck, don't look for a new method. Look for one small action you can repeat tomorrow. Not perfectly. Just consistently. Language is built the same way trust is built, through small moments kept. Those small actions worked because they respected the brain, the body, and real life. They didn't demand heroism. They only asked me to show up. And sometimes, that's the most powerful action of all. Standing alone, ending warm. There is a strange moment that happens near the end of a long struggle. Nothing explodes. Nothing dramatically changes. You just wake up one day and realize you are no longer fighting the same way. That's how this story ends for me, not with victory music, but with quiet warmth. I was still standing alone, in a sense. But I was no longer lonely. And that difference matters more than it sounds. Standing alone at the beginning felt like punishment. No help. No guidance. No one slowing down for my English. But standing alone at the end felt different. It felt like balance. I could stand because I had learned how. Independence was no longer forced. It was chosen. Psychologically, this is called self-efficacy, the belief that you can handle what comes next. Self-efficacy doesn't come from being rescued. It comes from surviving difficulty and realizing you're still here. By the end of those weeks in the United States, my English was not perfect. My accent was still there. My grammar still bent under pressure. But my relationship with English had changed completely. I no longer treated it as an exam I might fail. I treated it as a companion. Sometimes helpful. Sometimes frustrating. Always present. And that mindset shift unlocked something important. Consistency without fear. Looking back, climate, culture, love, marriage, and family were never obstacles to learning English. They were the environment in which English became real. The cold taught me patience. Cultural differences taught me observation. Love taught me motivation. Marriage taught me listening. Family taught me responsibility. Fear taught me humility. Small actions taught me trust. Each part shaped the language in a way no classroom could. There is solid science behind this kind of transformation. The brain learns best when challenge and safety exist together. Too much safety, and there is no growth. Too much challenge, and the brain shuts down. Standing alone at first created challenge. Finding connection created safety. Together, they formed the perfect conditions for change. This is why so many learners plateau. When they only study, but never live the language. I often think about the question in the title, "No one helped me at first." Can you stand alone? The honest answer is not a simple yes or no. Standing alone is not about strength. It's about willingness. Willingness to stay when it's uncomfortable. Willingness to sound imperfect. Willingness to let time do its work. Most people don't fail at learning English because they lack ability. They stop because they decide the discomfort means something is wrong with them. It doesn't. Here is the warm truth at the end of this story. You don't stay alone forever. But you do need to stand alone long enough to meet yourself in the process. Long enough to see how your brain reacts to fear. How your body reacts to stress. How your heart reacts to connection. Once you understand that, language learning stops being mysterious. It becomes human. English didn't save me. America didn't magically change me. I changed because I stayed present. I stayed curious. I stayed imperfect. And slowly, quietly, life met me halfway. That's often how it works here. Effort first. Warmth later. If you're listening to this and feeling tired, behind, or invisible, let this ending speak to you gently. You are not broken. You are early. Early in the process where things still feel cold and unclear. Keep standing. Keep listening. Keep speaking, even softly. The warmth comes after. And when it does, you'll realize something simple and powerful. Standing alone was never the goal. It was just the beginning of learning how to belong without losing yourself. You know what's interesting? At the beginning of this story, no one helped me. Not with English. Not with the weather. Not with culture. Not with loneliness. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I didn't suddenly become fluent. I didn't suddenly feel brave. I simply kept standing, one slow sentence at a time. And maybe that's the real lesson hiding inside this story. You don't need perfect English to move forward. You don't need confidence to begin. You just need to stay. Stay with the discomfort. Stay with the silence. Stay with the process. If you're listening to this right now while feeling tired, stuck, or close to giving up on English, this video wasn't an accident. It found you because you're still trying, even quietly. And here's the part one don't want you to miss. In the next videos on this channel, I'll continue sharing real English stories about life in the US, love, marriage, family, culture shock, and learning English slowly, naturally. Without pressure. Not textbook English. Not fake motivation. Just real life, real feelings, real English, spoken slowly so you can listen, read, and speak with confidence. So if you want to improve your English listening skills naturally, learn real American English through stories, and feel less alone while learning English, subscribe to the channel now. Like this video so YouTube knows it should show it to more learners like you. And leave a comment. Where are you learning English from? Because the truth is, no one helped me at first. But stories helped me stay. And if you stay with this channel, I promise, you won't stand alone anymore.